As a person who lets herself get lost in the creative process and experiment with any medium that fits my project, I often find my surrounding environment very messy. It is pretty normal, but for me it's a lot easier to focus when at the end of the day I clean up my space and allow new mess to be created the next day. While I was organizing all of my patterns and shelves, I found fabrics to experiment on with lino-cut printing and started the week off with that. Before, I've only tried printing on dry fabric and wanted to test it out on wet for a drippy ink effect. I tested it on synthetic and organic fabric to observe the difference and played around with paint amount and fabric wetness. Since I didn't have printer's ink, I substituted it with acrylic, which I tried to set by ironing the print after letting it dry. I discovered some lines and I thought that maybe the fabric was straight, but no, I was drying it on the drying rack and you can see the lines of the drying rack because the paint was trying to seep away from those sections that it touched the rack with. So cotton is definitely a no-go unless I dry it on the floor, which would be a very tedious process because, well, it doesn't have any air to escape and the drying process would be a lot longer. But I don't really like how it turned out anyway because the fabric is very much painted all the way through and I wouldn't want the fabric to be blue. I still want to preserve it mostly white. So the synthetic fabric would be probably the better choice because especially my skirt bottom portion is already made out of this fabric and I was hoping it would turn out good, and it did. I definitely like it a little bit less than when it was first printed because it seeped a little bit further than I would have wanted. And if you remember, this was my first attempt and this one was second, so it had way less paint and the fabric itself was already a bit on the drier end. So I'm assuming this would be the method I would go for, and actually I don't mind how like drippy it is, how unreadable in some areas it is, because it does kind of resemble the idea that I'm going for, like the droopy ink effect, like the memories, the traces of that print. So this is pretty much okay, I guess. Even if it turns out like this, I don't mind them looking a bit different in different areas. I will cut little sections of them and wash them by hand, see how they wash out. I did fix the color, the acrylic paint with the iron right now, but I, well, can't really tell how long it's going to last, although the pieces that I'm making are definitely more like a trial pieces. If I were to replicate the skirt or any of the pieces that I'm making right now, I would definitely go for printer's ink, not acrylic. It's just what I have on hand now, so it doesn't really matter. So my wall mood board is not really moving anywhere right now. I just attached a couple of things that I feel like might be relevant to the collection, even though they might seem random. But now, because I'm developing this print for this skirt and it's going to be pleated, I was contemplating two options. Either I print this specific print over top of already made pleats, or I loosen those pleats, kind of open them up and print when they are flat and then gather them up again. The only issue with that is it doesn't exactly look like a stamp very straightforwardly, so when I pleat it loses all of its language and it just becomes a blob of messy paint, which is not what I want to go for. So because I'm also not going to be able to loosen those bottom pieces up, I'm probably going to be printing over top. So I want to just in case test out another option and do the dry printing method again. So right now I'm going to take this down and try the dry printing method with this same stamp over top of what I already have here at the bottom section. So it seems somewhat saturated. I'll go over all of those sections a little bit more just in case. And when I'm going to be printing, not the entirety of that stamp is going to get onto my fabric. I'm also going to put my sketchbook under it. Try to place most of it onto the fabric. And I'll focus my attention onto the fabric more than the fucking sketchbook that just moved. All right. So the sketchbook printer is going to be a little bit droopy because I just moved the fabric piece. That's okay. we're not here for the sketchbook page, we're mostly here for the fabric, which hopefully is going to turn out all right. Okay, so we start with the less important part of the sketchbook. Okay, it looks good. Oh, actually, the fabric piece doesn't look bad at all. It does provide more language. It does look more like the stamp itself because it's less droopy, less distorted. Sure, the print isn't perfect because this isn't the lino that I would have loved to use, but well, okay, I'm actually happy with it. I printed those images out for the mood board, but because our printer was broken, it printed awfully and you can't really see any images. So I'm gonna use this as a disposable piece of paper that I could play around with pleats. With my skirt, I have the bottom crumpled and I want to see how it's going to look printed over top of already pleated pieces versus the pleated afterwards. I'll try to mimic the depth of my pleats more or less. The pleating is done. I'll crumple the bottom. This should be easy with paper because I was taking the idea from paper crumbling. This is even going to stay better than my pleating and crumpling of the skirt. Okay, how do we like it? What are our thoughts? I don't know, what do you think? I feel like this method is a little bit too chaotic, and even though this distorts the actual print a lot more, it still feels a little bit more accurate to the actual thing that it was before. So I'm leaning a little bit more towards this one because even though it's distorted way more than this one, this feels kind of unreadable. I don't know, maybe if it were extended, it would be a little bit more understandable. Again, I'm judging this off of a paper sample, which is not the best idea. So once the fabric sample dries, I'll probably try and pleat it a little bit and see if I like this method, since this is the one I'm leaning towards in the paper version. But I'm gonna stick it to my sketchbook and see how I feel about it in a couple of days, that when I check it out again with fresh eyes. Here at the ironing board at my parents' house, trying to fix the front portion of the sweater. If you checked out the previous video, you saw me complaining about the fact that these areas are a little bit raised, and back then I thought maybe that's okay, that's the style I could go for. But now, because the back is super neat and clean, I would like the front portion to look the same. My mistake, of course, and this could be treated as a sample, but I would like it to be the final thing, so I'll try to fix the raised issue a little bit by ironing it. I googled just in case how to iron woolen sweaters. This is merino wool, so I will try to be very gentle with it. There were a few tips that I would like to follow. So apparently it's good to iron with the steam function on the iron. Number 2, they said no starches, so I'm not going to starch this thing anyway. I didn't want it to be stiff. I would like it to keep its softness. And another one, tip number 3, would be to not apply pressure, as it may scorch the thing and make it shiny. I will try to be very gentle, iron it, and we'll see what happens. So I did flatten it just a little bit, especially in areas like this. You can see it's a little bit more close together. The knitting in itself is a bit flattened, that's a bit wider and stuff. But while I was doing it, I discovered a couple more errors with the front. Very clearly noticeable holes that I completely disregarded when I was fixing the back portion of this. Some areas are stretched out for no reason, so I'll be fixing those later on as well. But it's a little bit better than it was before. You can clearly see, especially on camera, like there are way more areas that don't look perfect in the front section than there are on the back. That said, there are a couple of areas with the back pattern of it. This is a bit way too rough, when it, especially if you look at the side by side of this and the pattern I was modeling it after, it's a bit clearer. Maybe it's nice that you don't really like see very clearly whatever is going on with this one, and it's just a little subtle nod to the fact that it's a human body, it's a female body that's been scanned and stuff. Also, disregard this looks completely awful. I tried a couple of methods of connecting it. I first of all connected it the normal way around, and then I thought, wow, why don't I repeat the same connection method that I did on the shoulders to make it a little bit more raised? And then I realized that it would be fucking white stitching. That would be so awful looking. So I'll be connecting it like a normal person later on, and I'll be knitting the other side here and the neckline finish as well. This is how it's looking so far. Obviously disregard this section and how imperfect the front knitting is, but I'm size small usually, and this is turning out to be either size medium, size large, which wasn't something I was going for with this top specifically, but it's great. Our collections are supposed to be for the contest that I'm applying to at least 20% for people above size small, which is completely normal. Average size would be either medium or large, so this I would have to double check on people who wear those sizes to see whom it fits a bit better, and also I would have to keep this in mind when I work on the bottom portion for this look. I haven't determined it yet, we'll see what goes with this, but then I would have to just keep in mind that it should be either for the person of size medium or large once I see who it fits a bit better. Once I finish it, I think it's gonna look good. Also this section, because I only connected it to the front portion, I kind of don't mind how it goes a bit wide in these areas, and I'm not sure I'll be able in this collection to keep this back portion just detached because it might just not go with the collection at all. But perhaps if I were to attach it just a little bit further, for example, if this were to be attached until here, maybe it could look interesting. I don't know. I would have to play around with this, but we'll see. There's always room for experimentation, and that's my favorite part of the process. So in moments like these, when a section wasn't attached just because I was going to take it apart anyway, just didn't have the time to, now I tried it on and I kind of don't mind how it looks in the back. I love those accidental moments because they kind of give you inspiration to move forward in sections that you wouldn't probably even try yourself. So one piece of advice I would give is always try out your samples, even when they're in the raw stage, whenever you haven't finished the idea that you're working on, even if you're working on a very specific detail at the moment, try it on halfway through multiple times, because you'll probably find out that some ideas, some methods work a bit better. Maybe if a pin accidentally fell out from the area that you were trying to connect and then it falls in a very beautiful way, in a way that you weren't expecting, it's going to result in a very unique outcome that you wouldn't make up yourself. So I love those accidental moments, which is why I loved trying things on myself and layering them. So this little section might end up being a feature, not a bug. Hopefully that is going to be the case. That's it for now. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.